everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Web3 Deep Dive Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Wolfson. In today's episode, I'll be speaking with Staci Warden. She is the CEO of the Algorand Foundation. In this episode, we'll be speaking all about Algorand, the algo community, how Staci's X account was compromised, and much more. Before getting started with today's episode, I want to remind you to please take the time to like and subscribe to the channel so you can stay up to date on all the episodes. Your support really means everything. I also want to thank EduNode and the House of Web3 for letting me film today's episode at their beautiful podcasting studio in San Francisco. Without further ado, let's get started with today's episode. Hey, Staci, how's it going?
Hi, Rachel. Long time no see. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's so great to see you. I'm so happy you're here on Web3 Deep Dive Podcast today.
You know, I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but I didn't know about your new podcast. This is super cool. I love it.
Well, thank you. And now you know about the podcast. I've almost been doing this for about a year now, so it's about time that I've had you on as a guest.
Yeah, now I'm going to subscribe 100%.
Yay. Great. So Staci, before we get started, I just want you to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, your background. You are the CEO of the Algorand Foundation. So maybe just go into a little bit about what that means.
Sure. The Algorand blockchain is the best second generation blockchain out there. And I have the honor to be the CEO of the foundation. The foundation is responsible for things like managing the community, managing the decentralization process, the governance, supporting the builders on the ecosystem, that kind of thing. So when we think about kind of Planet Algorand that is built on the Algorand blockchain, the foundation is around to kind of help, build the roads and make sure the lights work on Planet Algorand and just kind of support the ecosystem. And so I run that foundation.
Got it.
I came from a traditional finance background, and I'm very proud to be a committed member of Web3 now.
So how did you get involved with Web3 coming from traditional finance? I'm always curious to know about these things.
Yeah, we all have our down the rabbit hole story, right? So I think I'm a little unique in this, in that I was asked to teach about Bitcoin. I had heard it was 2013. So I had heard about Bitcoin in the air, and of course I was a little curious, but I was not, I had a day job, and I was doing some teachings for the press, with the National Press Association, and they asked me to do a lecture on Bitcoin. And so I started reading about it, and then I started listening to podcasts about it, and then I started just getting into it and realized what a monumental achievement it was. And I thought at the time that it was a little bit more fit for purpose for the things that I care about, which is financial inclusion and access to capital and that kind of thing. And I'm not sure that it is, but that's what I got hooked. And then, I was at the Milken Institute at the time, and there was some skepticism there, but I wrote an article on Bitcoin, and it was the most downloaded article in the Milken Institute Review. Then I did a panel on Bitcoin that year at the Milken Institute Global Conference. It was the most downloaded panel. So then they started thinking, okay, maybe there is something here. And they gave me a little bit more budget and a little bit more. And I just got super, super into it. And then, DeFi summer, it just became clear to me that you cannot pay attention to this space part-time. You're either in it or you're not in it. So I made the leap, as they say.
Wow, I love that story. And Staci, for as long as I've known you, and I've known you for a few years now, I never knew that you wrote an article or a paper on Bitcoin. I want to read that.
Oh, totally. I've written now about 4 articles in and around payments, Bitcoin, Web3, now. So, yeah.
Cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Algorand. There's a big Algorand community, a ton of fans with Algorand. A lot of people are really excited for this podcast. So for those listeners that don't know what Algorand is, I know you mentioned, they're a layer 1 blockchain, but also talk about the use cases. Like, why would somebody want to build on Algorand, and what value is that bringing?
Yeah, so I think there is a 2-word answer, and then there's a longer answer. The 2-word answer is that Algorand has instant finality. And so if you are trying to have applications in the traditional finance space, or, I don't love this term, but like real world applications, you cannot have a period of time, even for a few minutes, even for a few seconds, where there is some uncertainty about which branch of the fork is the legitimate branch. And in Algorand, when you make a transaction, as soon as you hit send, it's final. And so that really differentiates us. I think that's our number one differentiator. We are also very fast and we are very cheap. Other blockchains can also say that, but we do 10,000 transactions per second. As a reference, Visa does about 7,000 transactions per second. And we are very environmentally friendly. We use I like to say we use the power of that it takes to charge a Tesla for a year. And then, of course, we buy carbon offsets on chain and to make sure that we're always carbon negative.
Got it. Okay.
But, the thing about blockchains is that all the juice kind of is in the consensus mechanism. And Silvio Macaulay, our founder, created a very elegant consensus mechanism in Algorand.
Right. Yeah. Silvio is genius. I need to have him on the podcast after you at some point.
Yeah. He's a pretty smart guy. That is for sure.
He is. Let's talk about, because I like to know about the use cases. Why would somebody want to use Algorand in their tech stack? What kind of real world problems can it solve today?
Yeah. So I think where you have to think about kind of this real world use cases is what do you need to achieve? And I'm not talking about pilots. I'm talking about what are you trying to do at scale? Because the promise of Algorand is that you can deliver what you are building at scale. We have the throughput, we have the low fees, and we have the low environmental footprint. So a couple of very interesting use cases building on Algorand. And I want to say that some of the ones that I'm talking about have taken the time to be regulatorily compliant. And so a lot of this has been kind of percolating for a couple of years now, but now they've got in the approval from the regulators, which turns out to be a very important thing. So if you look at a digital euro payments platform called Quantos, for example, they got approval from the Dutch regulator. They have now just been accepted for Europe, the passporting under MICA for the European Union. So now they're available in 30 countries. This is a digital euro built on Algorand. It's not a stable coin. It's not an algorithmic stable coin. It's the euro in digital form, but it now can move instantaneously. It can be used for micropayments and it can be used for programmable payments. What we in Web3 call smart contracts can now be done with the digital euro on Algorand. Now, what comes with that regulatory approval is not for nothing, though. The regulators also wanted to take a look at the blockchain itself. So we also had to pass the regulatory muster as part of the Quantos' approval process. But all of their customers need to be KYC'd, and so it's a regulatory environment kind of thing. But it's pretty real world if you ask me. I have so many. I can keep going.
I was actually going to say that's extremely interesting. And then, so how, Staci, and so let's see, that use case that you just mentioned, let's compare that to a central bank digital currency, because you mentioned it's a digital version of the euro. Why is this use case that you just mentioned possibly better than a CBDC?
Yeah, well, a CBDC is a direct liability of the central bank. And a digital payment is not a direct liability. It's a liability of the banking system. And so when you have a direct liability of the central bank, that gives the central bank a certain amount of control. And one of the ways that so you may or may not feel comfortable with that level of control from the central bank. One of the ways that they can exercise that control is by taxing savings if they want to improve the velocity of money. So if they want to if they don't want you to hold money in a banking account, then they can very easily lower the interest rate to induce you to spend your money. And so, some people are uncomfortable with the notion that the central bank doesn't want you to hold your savings. The other thing at a more macro level, these are some of the very common criticisms of central bank digital currencies, is that they are potentially destabilizing for the banking system, because in a crisis, you're gonna move your money very quickly. And we saw with Silicon Valley Bank, right, how quickly that can happen. You might move your money to a central bank digital currency. And for that reason, actually, central banks are only contemplating limited amounts of CBDCs issued to individuals, those that are contemplating it at all. but they're not they can be either or things. They're not mutually exclusive. But right now, what I think is very interesting is that you can, and I'm a fan of stablecoins as well, but you can have this digital money, but it can be instantaneous. It can be programmable. It can be done very cheaply in micropayments. This is I think this is revolutionary, actually. And that is one thing, but we have a number of other examples in like prop tech, in payment, other examples in payments that I can also go through for sure.
Would you say Algorand is more or most suitable for digital payments in terms of use cases?
I think payments is look, if I was going to do payments, you cannot have a payment. You cannot accept a payment and give your good away and accept a payment for it and have this even momentary idea that that payment might be canceled because that payment happens to find itself on the wrong end of the fork, right? And so that is a feature of blockchains, of all blockchains except Algorand. And so I think, if it was me and I realized that I am an interested party in this discussion, but if it was me, I would be very careful about relinquishing the good that has been paid for if I was not sure that that payment was actually mine. And so I think we're very well suited for commerce and financial applications of all kinds for that reason.
Okay, yeah, definitely. And I'd love to hear more about the technical details, but I'll ask that to another Algorand team member who can probably explain, like maybe Silvio, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, I can give it a whirl if you want, but
Sure.
But he would also be. So as I said, there are different kinds of consensus mechanisms, right? And so in Bitcoin, and it was an absolutely genius idea that Satoshi Nakamoto had. This idea that you would have a race to see who would append the next block, and you would be paid in Bitcoin for the appending of that block. And then if there was a tie, there would be this fork for a certain period of time, and then the 10 minutes, and then the next block would append to that side of the fork that had the most work attached to it. And so that is how you resolved ties. And then the fork that wasn't chosen, all of those transactions would go back into the ether, and then they would be picked up again. So that is how he solved the double spending problem. And everything about blockchain and crypto technology was really mostly invented in the 90s, except they couldn't solve this double payments problem. And Satoshi Nakamoto is a genius because he solved this double payments problem. But, fast forward for a while, Silvio Macaulay, not for nothing, invented a couple of the primitives that the cryptocurrency ecosystem more broadly uses: verifiable random functions, zero knowledge proofs. And he had a different idea called a pure proof of stake consensus mechanism. And then what happens there is a block proposer proposes a block. Your chances of being able to propose a block are based on it's kind of a weighted probability of the algos that you hold of all the total algos. The chance that you will be the block proposer is a probability weighted by the algos that you have. Say you win, you run like a little, it's a verifiable random function. You ran a little slot machine. It's totally random, but once you win, it's deterministic what happens. So nobody, just also not for nothing, there's no vector of attack that is known to anybody. It's completely random, so it's quite secure for that reason. And then a committee of about 1,000, this all happens, by the way, in 2.7 seconds, a committee of 1,000 verifies that block producer, and then another committee verifies the first committee and makes sure they look inside the block and make sure all the transactions are good. Then the next block propagates. But because of that consensus mechanism, as soon as you make that payment, you're done. It's just not a forking mechanism. It's a different kind of consensus mechanism. And that's why it works that way.
Got it. And you mentioned algos. So I just want to point out that is the token behind the Algorand blockchain for those listeners that don't know.
Yeah. Yep.
Got it. Okay. So Staci,
we had a little issue for a while with the algorithmic stablecoins, and I would be on podcasts saying it's not an algorithmic stablecoin.
Right. Algo, that's the name of the token behind Algorand. And I mean, what are your thoughts on tokens when it comes to layer ones? Like, how important are they to the ecosystem?
Well, I think, a layer one that is public, that is permissionless, it runs in a token framework, because all of the nodes that participate in upholding that network need to be incentivized because there is no central party telling people what to do. So if you want nodes to participate in your network, you are compensated by the token that is also the vehicle of passing messages back and forth around the network for that. Now, Silvio is a bit of a purist, I would say, and he thought that the principle of good citizenship should drive the network. So you didn't necessarily need to be paid for participating in the Algorand consensus. Also because it's very lightweight. It's a very lightweight protocol. And in fact, now we are pretty performant, so you need a pretty high-end laptop. But when we started, you could participate in consensus on like a Raspberry Pi. It was very, very lightweight. But one of the most exciting things that is happening this year is we are going to move to a pay for consensus, incentivized consensus regime, I guess is the right word. This year, we're rolling that out, I think, Q2 to Q3. So that is going to be, I think, transformative for us this year. And it will help with the decentralization of the network. And it will help with the participation of more, more algos participating in maintaining the security of the network, which is, of course, the most important thing. So we're pretty excited to roll that out.
Got it. Yeah, that is exciting.
Yeah.
Staci, can you talk? I know there's a lot of different projects built on the Algorand blockchain. You mentioned the digital euro, but do you have any other favorite projects that you maybe want to tell us about?
So now, don't get me in trouble because, as mother says, I love all my children equally. Not that I'm the mother of this ecosystem, but yeah, there are so many that are so cool, So you mentioned payments, and I always like in payments to talk about Hisab Pay because they are doing all of the payments now in Afghanistan. Most every nonprofit organization, charity organization trying to get payments into Afghanistan is using Hisab Pay. They've paid 1.2 million electricity bills so far. And we had a bit of a transaction spike, and that's because the World Food Program just doubled their pilot with us. Hisab Pay is looking to expand their reach this year into other areas. Also in payments, we are excited for, this is actually more about identity, but we are very excited about working with Aid Tech on disaster relief payments in the United States. One of the problems with disaster relief payments is that on the one hand, people need their money now. But on the other hand, there's a lot of fraud in the system and it's taxpayer money. So you have to be very careful. These charity organizations have to be very careful. But with an ID and identifying system, built on, in this case, on the Algorand blockchain, where you can, take a picture of your driver's license, take a picture of your flooded living room, establish your identity and have your identity, verified by a charitable organization enables you to get your aid very quickly. So then you establish your identity and then you get a checklist from Amazon of things you can buy, a checklist from Home Depot of things you can buy kind of immediately. Then though, if you try to kind of double dip, all of the agencies together can look and see, no, you already got money from, St. Vincent de Paul in Texas. And so you're not eligible for this money. So it helps both ends. It helps reduce the fraud and it helps get the victims the money more quickly. So that is also something that I'm pretty passionate about, I would say. And there's just all kinds of cool things about creating markets that don't exist before, right? So of course, TravelX has I talk about this a lot. They have created a secondary market for airline tickets. And just imagine, now you have to turn your ticket back in and, maybe you get all your money back. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have to pay a fee to fly again. Now you just, if you go to the Flybondi website, I really recommend all of your viewers do this. You can look, there's a whole marketplace of like tickets for sale. And it is in cooperation with the airlines that they do this, not in competition with them, because it saves the airlines OpEx money and it helps with their, the customers are happier and all of this. So it's kind of like a win-win, but it's creating a market that didn't exist before.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up TravelX because, and I'm shocked you didn't know about the podcast before because I had the CEO of TravelX was one of my very first guests on this podcast because I thought it was, yeah, he was on because it's such a real world, it's such a good example of how blockchain technology is being used today. It's bridging the Web 2 world to Web 3, which is what, I want my listeners to understand. So of course he was on. That's an amazing use case.
Yeah, totally. He's also an amazing guy, right? I bet he gave a really great interview. Yeah, he's just on fire.
Yeah, I recommend the listeners to go back and listen to that one with TravelX, because basically what he's doing is he's taking plane tickets and turning them into NFTs so they're easily transferable. You can sell them if you don't want to, if you decide you don't want to get on the flight. Like you said, Staci, there's a whole marketplace. And I think this is just such a great example of like how the world of Web 2 is coming into Web 3 slowly but surely. But none of this would be possible without blockchain technology as the underlying foundation.
Totally. And when you say it's not like he's done 350 of these things, it's a couple of million NFTs by now that they've done.
Yeah, I just think the biggest challenge, and Staci, it would be good to get your take on this when it comes to bridging Web 2 and Web 3 together, is just getting people to understand how blockchain can be applied, the value it can bring, and the benefits. Because I think a lot of times people hear about blockchain and they have these misconceptions about it. They think cryptocurrency and FTX and all of these things. But I think that's the real challenge with getting that bridge from Web 2 to Web 3, is just understanding how to use blockchain, which is why I wanted to have you on, just so you can, let people know that it's actually like it's beneficial.
Yeah, I think and look, of course, we don't do ourselves any favors, right, as an ecosystem. So we have had our fair share of nefarious characters, right? And in fact, my aunt said to me, crypto, is that still a thing? I thought the guy was arrested, like it all went away, because this guy was arrested. Um, but I think we'll have won when people stop talking about us. When we're just an infrastructure, like HTML or HTTPS, we're just an infrastructure layer. It works really well in some things. It works not as well in other things, and it doesn't have to be this thing that's always brought up. It's just there, doing what it's supposed to do, and because the advantages of the technology are pretty profound, right? And this idea that you can, this is to me so fundamental, this idea that you can bypass the correspondent banking system to make payments is to me quite, if you are, I use this example, but if you are, in Nigeria and you want to send somebody in Malaysia a movie, you can send them a movie in a minute over WhatsApp, but you can't send $10, right? It's crazy. You have to travel through the correspondent banking system. It has to clear at the Fed, has to travel back down the correspondent banking system. Several days later, maybe it gets there, maybe it doesn't, and somebody's taken 6% off the top, right? You could send a million algo in a second with a sub penny transaction fee, because it's the same ledger. You're just updating a ledger. You're not actually sending messages from bank balance sheet to bank balance sheet, which is the way that traditional banking works. So it's just different, and that has a lot of, I think, really interesting implications that the world should pay attention to.
Definitely. And I mean, and it's, you say you can send algos that fast, and, you can surpass all of these fees and people can get it instantly. And then what's really cool is like, you take that and you can sell it, right, for actual fiat, kind of like with Bitcoin, right? So people can actually use that money to pay their bills, or, they can hold the algos and watch it go up in value or whatever. That's what I do with Bitcoin.
Yeah, or use it to make purchases, right? I mean, I think the thing that made the regulators so nervous about Libra Diem is that it was potentially so big that it would be a global currency, because
Hmm.
everybody has a WhatsApp account and people could pay over WhatsApp, and that was a terrifying, I think, idea. But it also I will say it kickstarted regulators thinking more seriously about the space.
Definitely. What are your thoughts on that? What are your thoughts on regulations in turn? Do you think it's good for the space to be regulated? Do you think it's going to help gain mainstream adoption? What are your thoughts on that?
100%. And what I think is interesting is that kind of this is the consensus view now among everybody in crypto, that we need smart regulation. It is no longer, I think, the era of the, cypherpunks, right? It is the era of, this is a good technology. We are searching for real world use cases. We've got a couple of good examples, but we need a lot more examples. We need them to get traction. And in order to do that, we need regulatory certainty. And so when I say we, I don't mean we at the Algorand Foundation. I mean we as the crypto ecosystem more broadly. We applaud regulatory initiatives that seek to bring clarity, and yeah, and it's an unequivocally good thing.
Right. And we'll have to, we'll see what happens in the United States because there's a lot of, a lot of regulatory uncertainty here in the US, which is why, I think we're seeing a lot of these projects and probably, the builders on Algorand, they're building in different places. And like you said, the digital euro, I mean, one day will we be able to see the digital dollar built on Algorand? Who knows?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Staci, I want to ask you this question because it was interesting. And so your X account was recently compromised. What happened? I actually didn't
Um,
know. I just read about it on Cointelegraph. I had no idea. But anyways, I
right,
wanted to ask you
right,
about that.
right. Well,
Switching gears.
yeah, no, right. Well, I um, I have to be careful because there's a couple of investigations going on, and so I will just say what happened, but I'm not making any kind of
Okay.
accusations. Everything is alleged, right? But I was in a Verizon store and I was buying a tablet. And to sync the tablet in the store, I typed my PIN code into my phone, and uh, then I left the store. And then Verizon started getting calls. I never lost possession of my phone at any time. Verizon started getting calls from me saying that I had lost my phone, and please could you change it to this other phone, this like iPhone. And I, had the PIN, I had my address, I had a lot of information about me. So they did that. This is like 3 days later. So I'm not sure kind of exactly what happened, and again, nothing may have happened in this Verizon store, but this is just when these calls to Verizon started happening. And then they turn my phone off, and my Twitter account does not have two-factor authentication. It has, it has a random generated password and all of that stuff. And like all my other sites have all of that. Right. So, but they used my phone, my two-factor authentication, which was to my phone, but they had, use of the phone, and they had some fun for it. Now, of course, there's like 10 people working at Twitter. So this started Thursday. I mean, we could not get anybody at Twitter. I mean, the Algo fam, thank you, Algo fam. Like so many people in Algo fam were like, Twitter, hello, Twitter. All the employees, we had our lawyers, and I do want to give a shout out. We finally did get a gal we did finally get a contact, a human, and she really did help us. But it took a while to get to somebody. I mean, it really did. Like there's not a lot of people there in this area anymore.
Yeah.
And so then, then it got resolved. I mean, I guess I don't mean to be tongue in cheek about this, but one not good thing, but one kind of silver lining is that it was so egregious that people were pretty sure it wasn't me, like that something had happened. I would have felt very, very badly if it was subtle and there was a subtle scam and it looked like I was really trying to, and people lost money. But it was pretty terrible stuff. Now, I will say one funny thing about this. There's a couple of funny things. One is that there's some DMing going back and forth between the hacker and his buddies, and in which they're saying, "God, this Algo fam is like so rabid. I mean, they are they are just on fire." And I was like, "Yeah, they are. Yeah, you know it now. Yeah, they are." And I also got like 250 new Ethereum followers. So I mean, you look for the silver lining, I guess.
Yeah. Wow. No, that's an interesting story. I had no idea what happened, but yeah, the Algo fam, they're on that. And
They're on it. They
anytime
are
I
on it.
tweet about Algorand, they're on that. They're on the tweets.
Totally. Yeah, totally. No, they're engaged. Let's just put it that way. And I'm a naturally positive person, but it was pretty terrible. I'm not making light of it. It was I should have had two-factor authentication on that thing, and it was like my fault. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it's over now.
Yeah. Yeah. Lesson learned. But anyways, it seems like there's a lot of compromises happening nowadays with like the SEC, I mean, gosh, that was crazy, approving the spot Bitcoin ETF before it was actually approved. So, So Staci, you mentioned, well, we were both talking about how active the Algo family is on X. So they actually sent me a number of questions to ask you, and we only chose a few. So I'm just going to ask you the ones that we chose.
Okay.
Let's see here. So Algorand Ventures recently announced a strategic investment in Folks Finance. What are Algorand Ventures' top strategic investments? What is the size of the investment portfolio? How many companies? What is the portfolio valuation?
So Algorand Ventures made, I think, uh, about $8 million in investments last year, and we invested just this quarter in Hisab Pay and DFly and Fractal Monsters and Gora. I'm sorry, it was $4 million invested last year. They did like 20 deals last year, so it was pretty active for sure across the space, from payments to infrastructure, as I said, and Hisab Pay was a $500,000 investment. So that's a strategic investment on our part, on the part of Algorand Ventures for sure. I will also say that it is coming to time for the Algorand Ventures transparency report. I think it will be released in March. So it will be better than last year's, which was, pretty terrible.
Cool.
I mean,
Okay. Well,
it was mostly about the grants program, and we had made a lot of grants that were ill-advised, in hindsight. And I think that the community will be prouder of us this past year and how we handled our Algorand Ventures portfolio. Yeah.
yeah, I was going to say, please send that my way because I'm happy to look into that for a possible
Yeah.
feature article.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, Staci, that actually reminds me when you were talking about that, it reminded me of, and I think I was invited. Did Algorand host an event in India? Isn't Algorand doing a lot in India?
Yes, Algorand is doing a lot in India. And in fact, I was on the next block a couple of weeks ago, and they didn't ask me any questions about India. And the Indian community was just, like very mad that they didn't ask any questions about India. So you are not going to incur their wrath, I think.
Good.
But we had an impact summit in India. We announced a number of different partnerships. We have a ton of momentum off of the back of that summit, and a lot going on in that country. And it is sort of three prongs. One is education. We're going to double our university partnerships. Second, it is like developer engagement and accelerator based, right? So we have a big partnership with T Hub. We're starting on Monday. Actually, we're launching a next cohort for developers in the T Hub accelerator. We have a partnership with Thai Bangalore, which is another big organization in India. So our strategy there is to partner with these big, well-known, well-respected partnerships to get the word out and to leverage their expertise in the same way that they leverage our expertise to kind of make that. And then last is to find projects that are actually building on Algorand. And so we've got a couple now. One is with an organization called Mandeshi. They're a women's bank. And so the way that they allocate credit to women, this is mostly rural women, is that they form groups and the women kind of vouch for each other for their credit. And what they want to do is they want to move to a system where a woman can get credit kind of on her own. And so in order to do that, it's a little bit like the aid tech example. They have to find ways of certifying that they are creditworthy in order to get loans. And you don't believe them unless it's on a blockchain where they can't, because they might tamper with the information. And if that is on the blockchain and it is certified or accredited by another party on the blockchain, it can't be tampered with, then Mandeshi can move to a regime where women can get credit of their own accord. And we think that's pretty cool. So
Yeah, no, that is cool. I also think it's cool that, it seems like Algorand is doing a lot in like India, Afghanistan.
yeah,
Last time I saw you was in
Nigeria.
Dubai for that big
Yeah,
event.
yeah.
And it seems like, there's a lot of issues that Algorand is solving in places like that.
Yeah, we're trying. I mean, we're trying to go where, I mean, look, I love our DeFi marketplaces. I love our NFT marketplaces. All of that is also very important to the health of this ecosystem. But we are trying to find ways to have the biggest impact we possibly can. And when you think about developing countries and emerging markets, it's hard to, this is not exactly the right phrase, but it's hard to go after that business, quote unquote, unless you're confident that you can scale. And so we can do that because we know that our success will not be our demise, right? Like gas fees are not going to get so high that people in developing countries can't avail themselves of what we have, tried to do. So we're trying to figure out these markets with scale. And also, Indians, they are mostly technically inclined, right? So, it's and it's going to be one of the fastest growing countries in the G20 for the next decade, probably.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
we thought very hard about which country we were going to go big in. We wanted to do one. We thought very hard about it, and there's some good candidates, and we hope to have. But we're doing this in a very, we try to do everything in a very kind of considered way, right? So we're starting with India. We have a very good country manager in Nigeria. So we're thinking about, we're going to do a big push in Nigeria this year or not. We are looking at a couple of countries in Asia to do maybe not quite a big as push as in India, but to start, this quarter paying a lot of attention to Vietnam, for example, and then kind of working our way around, of course, Latin America. We've always had a very good relationship with koi banks, a lot of good builders in Argentina, Brazil, Colombia. We've got people in Peru, people in Colombia, people in Brazil. So, we're pretty, we're pretty fired up.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to be excited about. Staci, I know we're running low on time, so just wanted to ask you, what can we expect next from Algorand Foundation and Algorand?
Okay, so what you can expect, first of all, is a lot on the tech side. So, number one is we're going to start incentivizing consensus, and that will be rolled out in the middle of the year, and that is going to be a game changer for this ecosystem. And so, I really, hold on to your hats, everybody. We're very excited about that. Second, we have now in a kind of a developer beta, a fully Python developer environment. We're going to be rolling this out in March. And so you will only need to know Python to build on Algorand. And, a lot of people know Python. And so we are very focused on that. And you said this before, how to get from Web 2 to Web 3. Well, part of it is speaking the language that they know in Web 2. Don't come expecting them to learn your language. You're the upstart, right? So go and make it easy for them. And AlgoKit has been going on for a year. We've made it better and better, better developer experience, a better debugging experience, much more visually kind of laid out so that you can see very easily, where there may be issues with your code. So that's all a bit more intuitive, like developers in Web 2 are used to. So we're pretty excited about that as well. Also, one of the complaints that we get about are we decentralized as we claim we are, is that we have relay nodes. And so it's kind of like a hub and spoke model. The relay nodes move messages between the other nodes, the participation nodes. And so we are now moving to a purely peer-to-peer network. And that will also help with the decentralization. And we'll still keep the relay nodes, and you can pick a relay node path if you want, but you can also pick this mesh network peer-to-peer path if you want. Now, these things go together, right? Because if you incentivize participation, you get more of these participation nodes, and then you have a better mesh network. So it all kind of fits together in a grand scheme. So those are the things we are, really, really excited about. Of course, we're excited about our Decipher coming up.
When is that?
That is going to be in Barcelona in June.
Okay, well, I hope to be there.
Yeah, you totally have to be there.
Decipher is like the best.
The Decipher is totally the best. That's totally the best, and you absolutely have to be there.
Okay, good.
Just like 2024 is, it's going to be on fire for this ecosystem. Also, the build, it's not really about us so much, it's about the builders, right? And so Decipher, just by the way, is going to be very focused on builders. And the builders have also been working hard in 2023. And I'm excited for them to start reaping some of the rewards of their effort this year as well. And we're going to be right there talking about them, supporting them, and giving them help where we can.
Cool. Yeah, no, I agree. I think 2024 is the year of the builders, and they're driving this Web3 ecosystem. And yeah, that's what's driving everything. So the builders are extremely important.
The community is also important, though. I mean, we are out of the grant making business at the Algorand Foundation. The community has got to decide how to spend its money. We are, and they will be quick to point out that our front end is not where it needs to be, and that is true. We need to make it easy for them to participate in this process. So that will happen in Q3. We're collecting, issues and problems every governance period gets a bit better, but yeah, they will decide how the foundation spends its grant money. So it's not super easy to do that, and it's also very time consuming. So we're going to be expecting a lot and asking a lot out of our community as well, right? They're already on a lot of committees, but even more we're gonna need them to do.
Awesome. Cool. We'll hear that, Algo community. You guys are you got to ramp it up.
Right. They know.
Yeah,
Trust me. They know. Yeah.
Cool. Well, Staci, this has been a real pleasure chatting with you. I would love to continue the conversation, but I know we're low on time. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Staci W_DC at Twitter. And I promise it's actually me is probably the best way. Yeah.
Cool. Great, Staci. Yeah. Well, thank you again for joining the podcast, and hopefully I'll see you in Barcelona.
Yeah, and I'll start listening, of course, and also just thank you for what you do for Algorand, but more, thank you for what you do for this ecosystem as a whole. You are this like smart, credible voice, and we need a lot of those, and you are really one of the good guys that care about the right things and really see the potential for the space. And so we're all super indebted to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Staci. That means a lot to me because everybody, it's an up and down roller coaster, and to stay in this industry for as long as we've been in it, you've got to be dedicated. So it means a lot to me that you say that. And I think the same way about you and Algorand. So I'm excited to see you again in person soon.
Okay. Yeah. 100%.
Thanks, Staci.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Special thanks to Aaron Bender for producing Web3 Deep Dive podcast. I'd also like to thank the sponsors behind Web3 Deep Dive. Finally, thanks to the listeners for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and share. I'll see you guys next time.